Are you working on a game and struggling with the art? You have arrived at the right place. My name is Adrian, and throughout my hobby game development journey, I have struggled with game assets, either by doing some asset flipping or by having on-off teams of hobby game developers. There was a real issue with them. In today's video, you'll find out what is programmer art and how can you start creating your own assets today. Redefine Gamedev is the place that focuses on how to get success in game development. If you're interested in this topic, consider subscribing to the channel. First, we need to answer a question. What is the first thing that the player sees when they enter the game? Do they see the code? No, they see the art. And not only that, all of the other contact points of a player with the game is the art, in fact. So it's really important that the whole experience is made cohesive and really awesome for the player. Having a good art style doesn't really mean having a AAA quality. What it actually means is having the proper aesthetics and the proper art direction to create a really nice experience. To get one step further, the game aesthetics refers to how all the elements get together in a nice cohesive way to create a unified experience that the player can enjoy, versus the other part, which is asset flipping, but it's actually a term that is used for objects that are just thrown into the scene without having any purpose of being there together, which definitely breaks the experience that the player has, and it turns out in negative reviews. By the way, regarding the asset flipping, I have an interesting video about that popping up right now if you're interested. To make this as accessible as possible to everyone, I've set up a couple of constraints which we'll discuss right now. The first, it needs to be budget friendly. That means the solutions that we're going to discuss are free. Second, it's easy to pick up. They also need to be super easy to pick up and use them today. And lastly, they should serve the purpose of starting with a prototype and actually making a final product and delivering a final game. We will actually discuss 3 art styles, and for each we will dive into what they are, how to use, and how the animations might work with each one of them. Let's get started. So, ASCII Art, probably the oldest way how to do art on any PC. ASCII stands for the character encoding, which ended up well in art as well. Basically, ASCII art consists in having a grid filled with different characters and also colors that artists can leverage to create complex images that spark the player's imagination. It was really nice, and there are actually a couple of nice games that are being done with this style today. One of them that comes into my mind is Dwarf Fortress, which actually runs right now, and they have a Patreon page and they actually amassed a lot of supporters. To create ASCII art, basically you don't need any game engine. What a luck! You can pick whatever programming language you want that can write into the console, for example C# or C++ or Java, it doesn't matter. Any programming language will do. Though if you opt of not using it through a game engine, note that you will need to handle input yourself, handle sound yourself, and other aspects, for example physics, that if you don't need them or if you can deal with them quite easily, you might just go on your way. A note here, the old ASCII art was bound to that grid and having only one element in one place. What we can do in the modern times is we actually can create sprites that can move freely, so that means that we can have overlapping characters on top of it. The most common way to animate ASCII art is frame by frame. Primitives. Primitives are already available shapes in your engine of choice. They can be cubes, spheres, capsules, or even more shapes. There are of course a lot of variations to these primitives. Of course, one thing that you can do is put a lot of them together and form a complex object. One thing to note here is that as the complexity of the object grows, also the unused parts of the object will put some problems on your frame rate. So make sure that you don't overdo it. One other type of primitive are voxels. And voxels are just cubes, but really smaller. You can think of them as pixels, but for a 3D world. What you can do with them is build objects, basically construct them piece by piece, And this enables some interesting features like, for example, destruction or player created environments and much more. One example that comes into my mind for a game made with primitives is of course Minecraft. And you can see here, even with cubes, you can create a successful game. Regarding how to use, of course, the primitives are already accessible in your engine of choice, Unity or Unreal. So just go to that specific place where you can create them and start using them right now. As for the voxels, there are a lot of solutions. What is a good example here is Magica Voxel is a free software that you can download and you can use it to export objects into your engine of choice. To animate primitives, you can use the game engine's built-in animation system. Now let's move on to the low poly. Here is an interesting fact. Did you know that a lot of low poly models can be actually made in less than 10 minutes? If you don't believe me, you can check Infenzia's channel for more details. Don't be fooled by their simplicity. Low poly today is not how it was back 10 years ago. By leveraging post effects, baked ambient occlusion and more, we can get really interesting pieces of art. Modeling low poly has never been much more accessible than it is today. Blender 2.8 got released some time ago, and I think the democratization of art is happening as we speak. So how to build low poly? Well, it's simple. As I mentioned previously, Blender is the key. It's a free tool. Of course, you can use other software, but they might not be free. Or there are other solutions directly into Unity or into Unreal that you can start building in the engine itself. Though I recommend using an external editor for that. There are a lot of free tutorials for Blender. You can just search YouTube. One of the major ones is of course Blender Guru, but if you want simplified ones, there are also a lot of them out there. Here are a couple of examples that I did with Blender. Hint here, it's much easier to model something if you have the blueprints of it. Regarding the animation, Blender is quite powerful here. Of course, you have the keyframe animation, which allows you to modify parameters like position, rotation of each individual object. But if you want something more, Blender offers the possibility to rig objects and make a skeleton and then use that with the kinematics so you can actually do complex animations as well. Is it worth it as a programmer to start learning to do some art on your own? I think it's totally worth it, and I think you can actually build a full game with it. In today's age, we should not be bound by the limits of, oh, I cannot achieve that. It's more like, oh, how can I achieve that? And art is one thing that is so accessible these days that anyone can do it. Of course, we will not reach a pro artist level in any time soon, but that doesn't stop us to make really good art if we really try. Our imagination is the limit here. Personally, I have opted to learn how to create low poly art, and the video describing that experience is popping up right now. Oh, and by the way, if you want to improve your chances of having a successful game development project, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I'm Adrian and I'm signing out.